Oh, what a setup indeed. It's another show of Making It Rain with my buddy in crime, slap shots from the blue line, Joe Caterino. How you doing, my man?
Randon, we talked for how many months now about, well, something's got to give, players got to get out, players got to be moved out.
Where's this big move? Where's this big move?
Nobody leaves.
Hey, we got Connor McDavid. No, none of that stuff happened. We just got a bunch of little small transactions.
Go figure. But hey, injuries will do that to you, right? It's a good thing, as it turns out, that the Kings ended up keeping all that young prospect depth, and it's paying dividends and helping them out in the big club. But yeah, we're recording this, 6 hours after the deadline, and not a whole lot to speak of from a Kings standpoint, but I think that's okay.
Yeah, I think overall the moves were like, let's just not squander the season that both these teams are having. Let's add depth for relatively cheap. And, we didn't need to make any big moves. I think Coyotes, stood firm with their 3 first round picks and prospects or whatever, or maybe they were asking for some of the no-goes from the Kings. We don't know what those conversations will be like, but it just seemed like they didn't want to squander the season. I mean, obviously you can't. With the Kings surprisingly in second place, after the loss the other night, teams are a little bit closer, but they have a fair amount of games left. All the teams that in the division that they're playing like over 10 games, Anaheim, Seattle, and San Jose all got relatively weaker because of trading away for the deadline. So I like a lot of these moves and just kind of getting depth going, not only for the big club, but for the Reign, which you and I are excited about because don't want to squander that either. The Reign have been a powerhouse all season. Some of their main players have gotten brought up because of injuries with the big club, but we don't want to see that seeding go away when going into the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. And you saw the Kings take care of a couple of additions today for the Reign. They picked up 2 right shot defensemen. Actually, I know you'll get to in your announcements. And they had Thomas Hickey that came through on loan the other day. So there's 3 defensemen that have brought into to Ontario to kind of shore that up a little bit.
Yeah, definitely so. And before we get started in depth, as always, you can find our stuff on Twitter at hockey_royalty and on our website, all the articles that have been pumped out in this last week about hypotheticals. Will this guy go here? Will this guy go there? All the transactions, all the paper transactions, this and that, game reviews, all at hockeyroyalty.com. Feel free to go on there and get your merch. Don't want to be left in the dust there. You want to say you're one of the OGs listening to Hockey Royalty and getting the first set of merch out there. Could be worth a pretty penny, or you find it at a thrift shop. So we don't know yet. Hopefully the former versus the latter. But let's get into it, big guy. Let's get into it here with the transactions. Let's start with the first one that came out a little bit before, but still, we get the privilege of being the first Hockey Royalty pod to talk about it. Troy Stecher, going to be wearing number 51, went to Los Angeles for a 7th round pick. I know Russell had the Twitter Spaces on yesterday. We talked about that in depth with Pavel, one of the contributors here at Hockey Royalty. You were there for that talk. What did you think after all the discussions about this trade, and how do you think it affects the Kings and maybe as a byproduct, the Reign?
First of all, I think Pavs did a good job kind of laying the groundwork as to a little bit of background onto Troy Stecher, what his game is, kind of what he can bring to the table. I don't think he's going to be anything that's crazy offensive necessarily, but in looking at some of his statistics, and I talked about this on the stream yesterday, was he's really, really good when it comes to zone exits and getting out of the offensive zone with possession. And Russell Morgan brought up, it was a great point that he said is, listen, the Kings, they still operate in that kind of 1-3-1, forcing teams to dump the puck in the zone. So it's really important to have a D-man that can cleanly pick pucks up and make that first pass out of the zone. So for Troy Stecher, I wouldn't look for anything to be too sexy or too crazy, but what I would do is pay attention to see how he operates in the defensive zone and how he moves pucks in transition. And I think if you're seeing the Kings be able to break out easily, a lot of that could be at the hands of Troy Stecher.
Yeah, that's our game. The Corsi numbers our game, and part of Corsi is getting the puck out of your own zone. And so, those exit passes are going to be great, and let your playmakers run with it. That third line, The Champagne line, as they've dubbed it, has been great so far. For the most part, a little bit stale in the Colorado game, but Colorado's a juggernaut and they've been steamrolling everybody. So for the most part, that's right line. Get the puck in the playmaker's hands. Don't try to do too much, and he can do just that.
Yeah, so I think it's a very solid, kind of quiet, under the radar move. And with all the injuries they have, I don't think they needed to do anything crazy. If there was that big move to be made with term for a young player, do it. But otherwise, he's a quiet addition that, hopefully again should just help see the Kings through this next few weeks here and hopefully into the playoffs.
Yeah, let's start with the next trade that went down. LA trades forward Braden Burke, who they just acquired recently, to Nashville for Frederick Allard, is how you pronounce that, I think.
Allard.
Allard. Okay. And so another right shot D, loading up on the obviously Doughty Roy injured, depth signing for the Kings and a veteran for the Reign.
Yeah. So I think, it got to the point where you mentioned the injuries, and it sounds like Doughty's going to be out for a little bit here. That they started in with Jordan Spence up. Obviously, Durzee's been up, and Austin Strand is up. So really, your right side was Helge Grans, and it was getting pretty thin back there. They had Marcus McIver, and they've got some guys that they've brought up on PTOs here and there. So the right side was getting a little thin. So now with the addition of Allard, the addition of Nelson Noje, which I know you'll get to, so they at least have Grans, Allard, and Noje, three guys, and especially in Allard and Noje, they've been in the AHL now for a few years. They're mid-20s guys. They're not old vets, but they've been around. They've been in the AHL. I know Noje's had a cup of coffee in the NHL. These are not offensive defensemen by any means. You're not replacing like for like with Jordan Spence and these guys over the next few weeks, but you're getting solid defensive contributors, a little bit more physicality to the play. So I think part of what we saw here today was they had an abundance of forwards. They've got a number of left shot D, which is why Marcus Phillips, I think, probably became expendable, and they needed to shore up the right side. I think that's what we saw today.
Yeah, let's just combine both of those. Marcus Phillips, drafted by the Kings in the 4th round, 118 overall in the 2017 NHL entry draft. A long time draft pick, working his way up, and gets shipped out for Noje as well. This might be a twofer type move, and to where they send Phillips over to maybe a position where there's less logjam in the prospect pool, and maybe he gets a better chance at seeing some time with the big club, and we bring in Noje, who helps us on the right side.
Exactly. And when you look at the left side of the Ontario Reign defense, you've got Cameron Gaunt, you've got Christian Molanen. We've talked about Christian Case of Stool,
screaming Norwegian.
he's become a staple in this lineup, and somebody else that I'm sure you're about to mention is they acquired Thomas Hickey, former Kings draft pick, on loan from the Islanders, which is an interesting move. But I think in reading some things from the Islanders Twitterverse is he wasn't going to see a lick of ice time, and I think it was just a matter of, well, we can either just not play him and sit him on the bench, or we can at least loan him out and let him get some ice time. And with again some of the Kings injuries, and Moverare is up with the Kings, it gives them a chance to get Thomas Hickey in, and he picked up a point in his first game with the Reign. So I expect he's going to see top 4 minutes for sure.
Yeah, it seems like they did a good job at balancing that stuff out, and it looked, and just before I even just got on here, I looked at, hey, I got asked like, hey, are they, do you see a move going in here, or is it just like, I thought it was like, man, they're loading up on right shot. What about the left side? And then you look at it like, okay, well, this left side has been playing with each other all season. They've been on PTO for most of the year, with Christian and all the guys that you mentioned. The right side might be a little bit more injured than we think with Roy and Doughty, and so that could be the detriment of the team when all these guys go up. And you got to get into the playoffs. You got to get a good seed. And if these injuries linger with both these guys into the Kings playoffs and the Reign playoffs, they're going to be a lot more reassured on that right shot.
Yeah, for sure. I think like you said, it was just a matter of the Reign and the Kings organization just making sure that these guys were balanced, and they're doing it with AHL experienced guys, right? I mean, no disrespect to the guys that they brought up on PTOs, and like I said, Casey Stool has stayed here, but rather than having to dip into that too much more, they've got some established AHL guys to take care of that right side. And one guy that we did not talk about, you and I, kind of beforehand, is they signed from out of college. Taylor Ward, old Dixon Ward's former Rochester American's son. He's a 23-year-old coming out of the University of Nebraska Omaha. And I know our guy Pavel, like you mentioned earlier, had some good words to say about him. Very physical. He's 6'2", 207 pounds, and Pav said that he's got a little. He classifies little Tom Wilson in his game, which is never a bad thing to have on your team, anyways.
Yeah. Nobody cares if you're not getting bothered, right?
Exactly.
It's like if everybody else is getting eaten by mosquitoes, but you're fine, like you don't really care. Like, and so does he just as long as he's buzzing around there and pissing other people off, I'm going to be fine with that.
Yeah, exactly. So a bigger body to add to that Reign lineup too, and it's another forward, which again I think that's part of the reason you see a guy like Braden Burke become expendable with some of the forwards that they have. I mean, they've probably got, I think, 14 forwards that counted that are healthy even after the Burke trade. So it's again just a numbers thing sometimes.
Plus, I think it adds a little something different to that team. I mean,
yeah, because really Doty, right, is
the only fighter or instigator type player, and so you got to have that nasty streak. We see it with Lemieux on the Kings, and what the Kings have been missing without him. Now, I'm not saying that Tonka and all those guys can't do a little bit of that, but Lemieux has been fantastic this season, and his aggressiveness and his instigating and standing up for his teammates, you notice it on the ice when momentum is swinging in the other direction. And so hopefully this can kind of do that for the Reign as well, who are primarily built with a bunch of skilled players. And so nice to add a little pepper to that salt.
Yeah, and he did play his first game yesterday. He didn't pick up any points or shots on goal. He did pick up an elbowing penalty. So again,
par for the course, apparently.
So hey, it's a guy that, again, like you said, kind of along with Doty, can maybe add a little spunk to the roster, and come playoff time, as we know that sometimes you need that. You
do. And so other than that, we've had before we get to the big extension, we have some people getting sent up and set down. And so for people who don't know, anybody who's on the AHL roster come trade deadline can be on the AHL team for the playoffs. So Byfield, Kupari, Spence, Filardi all sent down. And then after that deadline happened, brought back up. So whatever injuries remain or however well these guys play, pretty much the Kings organization is giving them as many outs or as many ways possible as they can for both clubs. And I think it's obviously a smart thing to do if you can do it.
For sure. And I think, depending on when guys get back, you want to make sure that, you have the ability to send, Spence down, and to send, we'll see what they do with the forwards or the Velarde or Kupari. I don't think Byfield's going anywhere, but to have the opportunity to play in the AHL playoffs is big. We'll see how far each team goes, but just to make sure that they have the ability to do so, I think is important. So again, I had tweeted it this morning, like, don't be surprised to see some of these big names, go down there. It's paper transactions, and that's what we saw. So, and every team does that, right? Just for those fringe guys or those prospects that are kind of up and down. So not surprising.
And lastly, the biggest news of the day, Joe's got to be pretty happy with this. Blake Lizotte, the mosquito in the tent, the lizard himself, 2-year extension with a 1.65 or 1.675 AAV, gets rewarded for the strong play this season. A lot of people didn't think he had a shot to beat Jad out for the spot, and he's continued to earn it. That line has been consistently the best line, or at least the most consistent line of the season for that group, maybe outside of whoever Deneau's playing with, because that guy's just a beast. But well-deserved for Lizotte, in my opinion.
For sure. I mean, the high school team that I have, we do awards right at the end of the season. One of the awards is Unsung Hero. And it'd be hard not to give that type of award to Blake Lizotte this year for the Kings and how well he's played. And, listen, he's exceeded my expectations. I'm a fan of his game for what he is and what he brings. And that's why I talked about how I think he should be on this team at the start of the season as the fourth line center. But, he's even exceeded my expectations because I wasn't sure that he was going to play this well to get an extension. I figured good stopgap, and then maybe they move on and they bring up some of the kids. Maybe Anderson Dolan solidifies that, but it really looks like Anderson Dolan's he's going to be a winger now. If you look about it, the Kings now, it's Kopitar, Deneau, Byfield, and Lizotte for the next 2 years. There's your spine. So, Anderson Dolan, you're a winger. Turcotte, you're a winger. Kapari, you're a winger. But again, I don't know that any of us are totally shocked at that. Maybe again, I think Anderson Dolan, people thought could have been that 4C, but either way, regardless, not to talk about anybody else.
And those guys can revert back to center if it happens in 2 years from now. But for the foreseeable future, you're right. The spine of the book is secure.
And good for Lizotte, like you said, he earned it. He has been a pleasure to watch this year. He works his ass off on the penalty kill. He does a great job. He's full marks to him. He's been a fun to watch.
And I think he's right around, I didn't write this down, but I think he's right around 50 points in 155 games. So a third of a point per game for a fourth line center ain't half bad.
Yeah, he had a pretty good, early in his first year, he actually had a decent point production. Again, you're not expecting that, but if they can chip in, if you can get that line to chip in, and more importantly, if you can get that fourth line to just play in the other zone and not in your own zone, you've won. That's a win for that line, and they do that. So
I hope they re-sign Lemieux, and they can keep those two together coming in next season. But it's been fantastic, and I like what he's done. Definitely earned, and sometimes you think of people getting contracts because of we need some stop gaps or this or that. But he, the Kings are not short on forwards in the pool, and so he definitely earned that money. So good for him.
He had an uphill battle. When you look at all these prospects, he wasn't drafted. He's not a big guy. He makes the team out of camp years back. They're kind of in that weird transition, as it were. Now they're loaded with prospects, right, that are mostly forwards. You figure he's just an easy guy to cut, right, or get rid of or not invest in. Yeah. And he rolls his sleeves up and says, the hell with that. I'm making this team and I'm making an impact, and he's done it. So great on him.
Yeah, it's great when you see a player just take the bull by the horns and his future in his own hands and get rewarded for it. So, all right, that's going to be the last transaction before we get going into the game recaps. We do have a commercial break here by our sponsor from DraftKings. The NHL season has been packed with dirty dangles, hat tricks, and big wins. As the action rolls on, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, has your shot to win big too. New customers can bet just $1 on any team and get $150 in free bets if they win. That's right. A bump in the win column for your team means free bets for you. If Sportsbook isn't available in your state yet, you still have a shot to light the lamp. Everyone can play for huge cash prizes with DraftKings Daily Fantasy Hockey Contest. DraftKings is giving all new customers a free shot at millions of dollars in total prizes with their first deposit. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code THPN. That is THPN. Bet just $1 on any NHL team and get $150 in free bets if they win. That's promo code THPN at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. 21 and older, age restrictions apply. See show notes for details. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, crisis counseling referral services can be accessed by calling 1-800-GAMBLER, 1-800-426-2537 in Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Wyoming, in 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-522-4700 in Colorado or New Hampshire, 888-789-7777, or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, 877-770-STOP in Louisiana, 877-H-467-369 in New York. Visit opgr.org in Oregon. Call or text Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889 9789 in Tennessee, or 1-888-532-3500 in Virginia. 21 years older, age apply, 18 or over, New Hampshire, Wyoming, physically present in states listed as Arizona, Colorado, Connecticut, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, Michigan, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Only minimum $5 deposit required. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. I don't think anyone could have done that better. Let's go.
Well done.
Cheers to that. All right, game recaps here. We'll switch it up here for the game recaps, goals, Condors, and Canucks. The losing streak continues, but we're going to try to find some positivity in these games. Ain't that right, Joe?
We will. I don't know.
I don't know if we'll be successful in that, but we'll try to find some positivities. Well, let's just start with the goal game. This was a catastrophe. 4-0 loss. Outshot every period. But let's try to get some good going in this game. What did you see just as a game as a whole, or is this just a throwaway and we should move on?
Yeah, listen, the Reign have not been shut out all season up until this point. Which is rare. You go a season without that happening, right? I mean, they've had some clunkers here and there, but rarely to this level. I just think it's one of those games where, these things happen. I think this was a scenario where you saw Rasmus Kupari's called up to Los Angeles. Jordan Spence is in Los Angeles. So I think this is the beginning of some of these guys that are getting called up. And, you've got a number of different guys kind of in the lineup, right? I mean, they had Kevin Lohan, Lauren Ouellette playing shifts. Nikita Pavlichev was back. I just think it was one of those games, and I hate to, make too many excuses, but it was just one of those games where they didn't have it. There was not a game that they brought a lot to the table. They weren't really threatening, and when they were, Ole Eriksson played well, but he only made 22 saves. It's not as if the Reign, put a ton of action at him. We talked about how that power play is going to look in the absence of Jordan Spence. They were 0 for 2 this game. So I think it's
power play down a full percentage point in just these three games. So it's been mighty rough with all the sharpshooters out of the lineup.
Yeah, and I think we'll see how this goes here over the next little bit. Now, obviously, you don't suspect it to be something too long term if Spence is obviously going to be available for the playoffs. But for now, it's not looked quite as sharp when you consider the fact that they have Spence and Velarde playing up in Los Angeles, and obviously Kupari's up there. So it's, they're, and Ferk too, not this particular game, but Ferk's been up in LA for a little bit too. So it was just one of those games, frankly, is the way I would classify it as lazy as that may be.
Yeah. And Turcotte's still out. You look at
Madden.
Yeah. So you look at the team, only 4 players had a plus minus of 0. Everybody else was in the negative. So just no line could get it going. It was just a throwaway effort there. And so, congrats to Eriksson for pitching a shutout. That's always difficult as a goalie, regardless of how bad the team plays. Usually, you get those trickle in, those things, but he seemed to be playing pretty solid this game.
The only thing I'll say that if we want to try to eke a positive out of this is this was a game where at least we saw Akil Thomas maybe a little more assertive. He led the Reign in shots on goal. He had 5 shots on goal, which is it's a start, right? You're looking for something to to get going with him, and he's going to see potentially more opportunity here. He's going to have to, right? Well, look who's up in Ontario, in Los Angeles right now. He's going to see a little bit more of an opportunity. So, again, we've talked about this, and I know we disagree a little bit that you do want to see a little bit more production. I think it would be nice, but I just wanted to get through the season and get reps. But I
want to see him get reps, but I want to see him produce too. I mean, you're getting to the point you're a 2nd round pick. I know you're coming off a double shoulder surgery. I get it. You're out for a lot of this stuff, but I just want to see flashes. And for me, this was a positive. You're 100% right. And I didn't even think about it until you said it, but I was like, yeah, that was a big positive of the game because we're asking for him to show those flashes and be more consistent, whether the points are there or not. The last 18 games, I've rarely seen Akil Thomas be mentioned or or noticed him on the ice, and he was definitely noticeable for spurts of this game, if not the whole game.
Agreed. And I think it's hopefully it's a sign of things to come. Although the last two games, maybe not quite as much, but we'll see. He's going to need to be a guy that they can count on here as we go forward.
And just as we hope the Reign will turn the page after this 4-loss losing streak, we're going to turn the page and go to this next game. So this next game, we're playing the Bakersfield Condors. Lose 3-2 here in this one, but at least there were some positives here. Started off rather quick with a Samuel Fagimo 20th goal of the season. Way to go, Samuel, man. 20 goals in a season ain't that easy to do. And, that shot first guy there has been lighting the lamp for most of the year.
Yeah, we've talked about him a lot, and he's turned into a really, I think he's taking that next step in his progression, right? And he's becoming a finisher that you wanted him to be at this level. And he's got 20 goals, and he added some more points over the weekend too, as we'll go along. But a good player, and as we've talked about on the point shares model through Sean O'Brien, he's very good on the defensive side of things as well. So really good start to the season for Samuel Fagimo, or start to the season, the whole season, frankly. And boy, that the goal Helge Grant scored. So if we can do a little
goal, the bright spot of the weekend, that was nasty.
Helge Grant. So. This will be I'll try to keep this to not too much of a tangent, but he is and I don't want to go too crazy, right? I mean,
tangent up. Let's take this off roading. Let's put on the 4-wheel drive here.
What I'm getting at is he looked like a really raw player last summer at the rookie camp. He looks a totally different guy, honestly. The way he has developed over those last, since the summer has been awesome to see. And I think it's because he's had no choice. He's playing all the time. When you started the season, I think the first couple of games, he and Spence kind of were in and out. So I don't know if they were planning on playing him as often as they did in these roles that he's got him in. And the plays he's made when he scores his goals, he's jumping up into the offensive zone, which we talked about is that type of player. He's not going to lead the rush. Jordan Spence and Sean Durzi have the capability to lead a rush. Granz isn't going to lead it, but he is such a smart player as to when to jump into the rush. And he's scored a number of goals this year from down low even in the offensive zone. And it's a great give and go. He reads the offensive zone and the lane that's there perfectly. He gives and goes with Tynan and a great shot. His evolution has been so good. And I'm very, very happy to see how well he's played. And we talked about it actually when Spence got called up. This is not meant to be a knock on Spence. We've raved about Spence. We were the first ones on the Rookie of the Year bus. Helge Grans had more points at 5-on-5 than Jordan Spence did. As many. So let's not, just because Grans isn't getting the same power play opportunities, rightfully so. Jordan Spence is dominant on the power play.
Yeah,
but Grans has been extremely effective as an offensive, productive defenseman at 5-on-5, and I don't think that can be overlooked. And I believe his defensive game is only going to get better because he's got the tools in the shed, right? He's a strong kid. I'm really excited about him. And again, I do want to pump the brakes. I'm a guy that I've talked about it. Don't hug your prospects. Be realistic. They're not all going to make it. Yada yada. I think you got to be really happy with the development of Grans in this first year.
You do. And I mean, we talked about it a little bit, and I can't remember which scout said this, but said that Grans is Rasmus Dahlin light, not as a high percentage to reach the potential but he has the same skill set, roughly the same size. And I mean, this is one scout's opinion, but you see the evolution of his skill and how fast it's taken off since he's been on the Reign, and it shows promise. And, he's getting slept on because Spence is having the year he's having. Durzi's doing it with the big club. Faber's getting all this Olympic, accolades and everything like that. But Helge Grans got size. He's got skill. He's got intelligence. He's just going to take time. He's going to take longer time to get to his roof or his potential. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's taking spots on the Kings, from people that maybe have other defensemen higher in the shelf.
we talked about last night on the Twitter Spaces that Russell put on. Brock Faber's name came up, and what I forget. I apologize to the person that asked the question because I'm going to forget who asked the question as to what right shot defenseman. What do you? They're not all going to make it, and they're not all going to be in the organization. Somebody's got to go. And my pick, and again, it's not a knock on the player, just for all the players involved. If I had to pick one to deal, it would be Brock Faber. Like I would. Gronz, I don't want to, he's one guy I really don't want to touch. Like, I may trade Spence before trading Gronz, if that's kind of where I'm at right now with this. If I'm just looking at it from a prospect standpoint, like he is a bit more of a project. I think as you're alluding to, like he's going to take a couple more years. Like he's not NHL ready, and he's probably not going to be NHL ready next year. Although you never know, if they have another rash of injuries, he could do the cup of coffee that Spence is getting. I just really like the potential of his two-way game a lot. And I think he's showing he can produce at the pro level. And I won't say that Faber can't produce at the pro level, but I think it's probably not common. And maybe I'm being unfair in saying this, but he hasn't produced, like that's not his game. So you now have to be an outstanding defensive defenseman. You have no choice because which he is, right? But he is at the level he's at. How that develops and how that goes, I'm sure it's going to be fine. But you have no margin for error if you have no offense to your game, right? Like he can't miss as a high-end defensive defenseman. And again, sure, he probably will. Again, that's not a knock on Faber, and I don't mean it to be. And I like the player, but I like the guy that is showing the ability to produce at the pro level and be a good two-way defenseman at the pro level. So I think it's, again, excited about Gronz. Trying to temper my expectations because I'm the guy that's always trying to pump tires on prospects, I think. But I'm very happy on Gronz.
So all the Kings fan base listening, he wants to get rid of Spence, and he thinks Brock Faber is a bust. So just kidding there, Joe. No, you know what? I think that, I didn't have appreciation for Faber because you don't really see much games, and then watching him in the World Juniors had a little bit more appreciation.
Sure.
Don't really watch the Big Ten, so don't really haven't seen him develop this year. I think he might grow on a lot of fans because apparently he's grown on the organization where he's super high on the depth chart behind Clark, for the depending on who you talk to. But maybe he'll grow on you as far as maybe that gap control and his feet are so excellent that you're like, man, you can't help but to put this guy in.
Hey, and
when we start seeing that, we'll be the first to tell you.
And I'm not going to sit here and claim to be any sort of expert. And I said it on the stream last night. There's people obviously in the Kings organization and around the league that have seen Brock Faber play a hell of a lot more than I have. I do question if the production isn't there now and it's not going to come. He has to be that shutdown D-man. And again, by all accounts, he's going to be. Right. But if it's a perceived value thing, too, if other organizations value him the same way that we do as the Kings and as our fans, then he's a guy that you can maybe get a mint for with your depth on the right side.
Yeah. I mean,
that's who you pull the trigger on.
We've seen Matt Royce stabilize this franchise on the right side, and Faber could do exactly that for another organization or even ours. Matt Roy's contract isn't forever. So, depending on what the organization wants to do, but it's going to be interesting which cream rises to the top, as they say, with Doughty, Clark, and all, et cetera, along the right side.
Yeah, that's going to be the $1 million question over maybe this offseason, frankly, that they could make that decision this offseason, depending on, potential trade acquisitions.
Yeah. So after the Gronz goal, Brandon Perlini gets his 4th of the year on the power play. Penalty kill still seems to be an issue for this organization, but it looks like they got a lot of guys that could help with that. So hopefully that stabilizes both for each part of this organization. But after this, it was all Bakersfield. Goals by Adam Cracknell in both the second and the third period for 12th and 13th on the season. Bakersfield outshot Ontario 37-23, and you don't really see that much for either club. Garrett Sparks back gets his first start in a long time. 34 saves on 37 attempts.
Yeah, and this was just as I mentioned it in the post game too. There was just no push. Like they went up 2-0, and then that was just kind of that was it. They got
Let's
outshot
put this
13.
baby on cruise control. Yeah.
Yeah, they got outshot 13-3 in the third period, which is a very, unrained like to be really outshot that badly in a game where it's a tie game, in Ontario, no less. So certainly not anything that we're used to seeing, but there was no push whatsoever. If we're looking for positives, which is what we said we were trying to do, TJ Tynan picks up assist number 64. And you alluded to it, you just mentioned it, Garrett Sparks, first start since January 8th and makes 34 saves. They didn't ease him in, that's for sure. So those were two positives of that game.
Let's move it over to the Canucks, which they play us hard every single time. And they lose it. I mean, well, with a mascot like that, you have a lumberjack and ice skates. You can't really take them lightly. We lose this game 4-2. Went kind of a weird first period. The Russian phenom Vladimir Tkachev with his 6th and 7th of the season.
Go figure.
Ontario are up 2-1, but we got outshot 13-5. So I thought this was just a rather weird period. Some good snipes. Samuel Fagemo with 2 assists or assists on both those goals. Yeah. And Thomas Hickey gets an assist there as well. But it just seemed like the goals came when they needed them, but the period was definitely all Canucks in this one as far as the momentum.
Yeah, it was. Again, so you look at those last 2 periods of play from the third period, the prior game, to this one, they were outshot 26-8. And again, I think you're starting to see a couple of things, right? I think it's one thing to have the forwards that are up in Los Angeles, but Jordan Spence is a big loss. They weathered the storm because of how well Spence was able to fill in for Durzi when Durzi was called up. But I think that's playing a factor. And let's not forget, like Mo Ferrari has been up in Los Angeles for a while now, and he was a stalwart on this defense group for the Reign too. So I think part of this we're seeing is because of some of the stuff that's going on in the back end. It's not necessarily all the forwards that aren't putting pucks in that. Though that said, that's obviously playing a bit of a factor here, right? When you look at the guys that are out of the lineup right now because they're up in Los Angeles, right? With Velarde, who was on absolute fire, Kupari. So, I think you're starting to see that, but it'll obviously be good for the whole organization when you get the likes of Victor Arvidsson back in the lineup for Los Angeles. And we'll see how that shakes out and kind of leaks into Ontario.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that all works out. And like you said, Mavari, very strong defenseman, could definitely help out either club. We would probably seen a lot more of him if Mata didn't stabilize his game as well as he did this season.
Completely agreed. And Oli, boy, talk about a guy. Hopefully he doesn't read Twitter or listen to us or anybody. Like, good job on Oli Mata because he's really settled in and had a pretty good run here for this whole season. He's played. He's kind of the defenseman I think that we thought we were getting. Under the radar, quiet. I mean, he's not great. Let's call spade a spade. He's not a great defenseman, but he's doing his job, and I think he's doing it pretty well, all things considered.
Yeah, I really agree there. And you know what? I got to tip the hat to Rob Blake. He seems to make a lot of these inexpensive trades that don't look flashy on the surface, but those players seem to play some big minutes. I mean, you got Mata, and then hopefully, Stetcher is looking like he's going to have to fill in a role with Doughty and Roy being out for an extended period of time. So it's going to be interesting to see that kind of thing and how it all works out. But, not flashy moves, but effective for the most part, especially this season.
So we talked about Blake. He came up on the stream last night. One of the fans said he was really not a fan of Blake. Thought that he's gotten lucky that, with the injuries and such, that they've had the ability to have guys like Durzi kind of fill in and Spence fill in. And I kind of made the point that I said, he acquired Durzi, right? He was in the trade. he made those trades with Toronto, brought over Grunstrom, Dursey, Moore, and the draft pick to get Bjornfit. So you can't call him lucky when he's the one that acquired those guys. So I think the mini tangent on Blake is I think he's done a very nice job, as you mentioned, with the under the radar. I think this is now where the rubber's going to hit the road. Like, okay, you have established a pipeline and a prospect pool. Can you take this team to the next level? Right? Dean Lombardi pulled it off by making the shrewd acquisitions and early on, and then when it was time to strike, he struck. And he got the Jeff Carters, he got the Mike Richards and the Marion Gaboricks. Like he made those happen. Can Rob Blake pull those trades off to get this team from, playoff contender to playoff team / cup contender? Because that's what's coming next. And that's what's going to be the next step. And if you want to try to do that when Kopitar and Doughty are playing at the levels that they are, that has to happen very soon. So now is the time for Blake, now this offseason type of thing is the time for Blake to let's see if he's able to make that happen. And part of it's on him, but also part of it's on the development of Quentin Byfield, for example, and other prospects those that aren't traded, they need to take that next step as well, so.
Yeah, it's gonna I think that there's gonna be a weird thing, and we talked about this way earlier in the season. So for everybody that doesn't remember, like when is there gonna be a fall off of Kopitar? If that is soon when the Kings start their cup window, how does the centers line up? Is he still gonna play first line minutes? Is Byfield gonna take a jump to be 1C, Danault 2C, and then Kopitar 3C? Like how does that work out? Is Danault get slotted down? There's gonna be a lot of shuffling that's gonna depend on Kopitar's game and how well he can stay relevant, and Byfield's progression. Danault, I think, is going to be pretty solid no matter where you put him. So, can you play him up and down the lineup? I think the biggest thing that I've seen, the reason they brought in Danault is to keep Kopitar off the penalty kill, and they've been playing him a little too much on there. And guys like Kempe, guys like Lizotte, you need just to be relied on more. Not that they haven't been, but the fresher the legs that you can keep Kopitar, I think the better chances you're going to have of him not having lapses in points. And, this is kind of just like a nitpicky thing. What was it? 6 games has been his longest of his entire career, which happened this season. But you never know when that drop off is going to happen. And, you don't want to speak about your captain, your franchise player, and probably, one of the best players to ever play for this organization. But reality is reality when it comes to sports. And so, like you said, with Rob Blake, to wrap all this thing up in a bow, from where I'm getting at, Rob Blake has to know where the temperature is and where this team is on the upswing, like being able to feel that temperature and then being able to pull off the right trades for the right amount of prospects. So I think it's a double-edged sword, as you will, to see when the time is right and then pull off the right trades to make that leap.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he obviously he heard the calls of the Kopitars and the Doughties in the offseason about where this team needs to start going. So you have to imagine the goal is to try to win with those guys, one more kick at the can with those guys. And to do that, you've got to do that pretty soon. So, and listen, Kopitar, he needs to produce, obviously, right? Oh, he's our first line center, all that stuff. The Kings, he's got to produce. I get it. But, I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit on, and I'm not saying that you're going there, that he's deteriorating, but he's still a strong two-way centerman. He's still a strong possession player. He is not getting hemmed in his own zone. He's not getting dominated night in, night out type of thing. The production needs to come, but he's not the only one.
I'm not saying that this season. I'm saying their window is supposed to be 24, right? Yep. So we don't know what's going to happen 2 years from now.
Yeah, it was more because there's a lot of that chatter going on, and I just think that it's too easy to look at the goals, assists. You see, they're not where you want them to be over the last couple of months. He's playing bad, and I just don't necessarily think that's the case. I think he's maybe not at the level that we're used to seeing, but he's still our number one center, and he's still very, very good.
That whole line's been garbage, just flat out. So, let's just say that. Let's call a spade, and they just need to get their act together, And That's pretty much what it is. And some of that can be, like I said, taking him off the penalty kill, making sure he has fresh legs. Kopitar, you're only supposed to focus on offense. Let's get you going. Let's get this line going because we need you, and let's move forward. I mean, that's just, I don't know. I don't have time for not calling a spade on that one. Like that first line needs to pick it up regardless.
They do need to produce. There is no question, despite the fact that even if they are, strong possession, etc., they got to produce. You're right.
So let's kick it back to the Reign with the Reign Player of the Week. I'm gonna let you go first on this one because not very many options, and so I'm gonna let you get the head start on this one.
I'm going to go Garrett Sparks. He hadn't played a game since January. Gets thrown in. The team's on a couple of game losing streak, and he's thrown right into the fire. He faces 37 shots. He turns away 34 of them. So, not putting that game on Garrett Sparks. I just thought it was good to see him get back in the swing of things, and I think he's going to play a pretty big role here for the Reign down the stretch. I was talking briefly to Sean O'Brien as they talked on their Calder Farmstead podcast about they had a trade deadline kind of preview, if you will, for the AHL. And one of the things that they had considered was if the Reign need a veteran or a backup goalie. But with Sparks, as long as Sparks was going to be healthy, then they didn't need to go that direction. So I think now that he's back, if he can stay on the ice, provide a solid vet backup role to the likes of Matt Villalta, because if I'm not mistaken, Sparks has a Calder Cup under his belt with the Marlies in Toronto. So, he's an important piece, I think, to the net. And I thought in his first game back, 34 saves, Reign Star of the Week for me.
I'm going to give my honorable mention before going into my Star of the Week, and I'm going to go Vladimir Tkachev for honorable mention.
Sure.
You don't know what this guy's headspace at. Not saying that this is him, but a lot of foreign players have a hard time, transitioning over the United States, not only from an ice standpoint, but a culture standpoint. Him being, I believe he's the only Russian-born player on that team. Maybe is Nikolai, Pavlichev, is he Russian as well? Or is he Eastern European?
I shouldn't say offhand without knowing, so
okay.
I won't.
So we'll just say maybe one or two, of the team there. And so the communication thing, the culture thing, having people around you, and not saying that he's not being embraced by the locker room, but, moving all the way across the country and expecting to be on the Kings and being on the Reign and then getting clean scratched multiple games in a row. Like for him to keep his head in the game and light the lamp twice in one game and do that, I think deserves an honorable mention. My Reign Player of the Week is going to be Samuel Fagemo, right? Multiple assists, multiple goals, keeping the offense going and really having an uptick to his game defensively this year, Sean O'Brien mentioned in that pod. And so I think he's doing everything that he needs to do, getting some call-ups with the big club as well to really make a push for the Kings roster come camp next season and be an integral part in the Calder Cup race come playoffs.
Yeah, he has been on an absolute roll. He's got a point in every single game this past, dating back to February 23rd, with the exception of the game that they were shut out. He's been a big contributor to them. And yeah, I think he's just kind of quietly going about his business, developing slowly. He had kind of that spark in camp, right? That people were starting, hey, maybe he actually makes the team out of camp. And it was probably best that he didn't. But good for him. He's having a really, really good season. Good to see he's going to push 30 goals this year, perhaps. So good for him. Hopefully. We'll see.
Yeah, hopefully. 15 games left. That's going to be almost a goal.
Yeah, he'd have to get hot.
He'd have to get real hot. He'd have to get bacon in the sun with no sunscreen hot.
Trying to be optimistic, Randon.
I like it. 30 goals for Samuel Fagemo coming up. Well, Joe, it's been a pleasure. Obviously, hopefully we have brighter days come, take away the rain, if you will, and sunshine ahead for this team. And come after the trade deadline, hopefully they bolster the blue line like they did, and that takes effect going forward. 15 games left. Stockton Heat have clinched a playoff spot. We're 4 points behind them and going there. You look at the race for the points there, tying it back in second, down behind 1 point of first place. So they need to get hot because we need him to get back-to-back MVPs and we need to clinch the playoff spot. So plenty of uptick available in those 15 games for the Reign, if I don't say so myself.
They can clinch tomorrow with a win against Grand Rapids. So
Would you look at that?
I say tomorrow, Tuesday night, whenever you're listening to this.
So, which, hopefully it's a W by the time you're listening to this. And you're like, hey, Joe, you called it, man. You called it.
Exactly. Let's get
well, thank you again very much, Joe, for taking your time out of your busy day to talk with poor old me. We have find us on Twitter at hockey_royalty. You can find us at YouTube right here where you're looking at it. But that would be youtube.com/hockeyroyalty. As always, thank you to our sponsors, DraftKings, promo code THPN. And if you're looking at more of a reader than a listener, all of our articles at hockeyroyalty.com, where you can find all of our merch. Joe, I can't say anything else besides go Kings go.
Go Kings and go Reign.